you through the chat box at this time. And please remain on mute and do not move around a lot while we go in the broadcast process. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Fair Coverage Now, Reshaping How We Report on Missing Persons, presented by NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. I'm Ashley Denis, on-air contributor and tonight's moderator. For far too long, we've seen disparities in whose stories get told, whose faces get amplified, and whose families receive attention and support. So tonight, we're bringing together journalists and thought leaders to talk about this issue. I want to thank WABJ's president, Phil Lewis, for bringing us together on this national platform. If you have questions, please use the chat box only, and we'll get to those. I'm going to start by introducing our incredible panelists. Natalie Wilson, I'll have you go ahead and introduce yourself and give a little bit about yourself.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Ashley, and good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I'm Natalie Wilson, and I'm the co-founder of the Black and Missing Foundation. I have about 2 decades in media relations or PR, and with the Black and Missing Foundation, I've been sounding the alarm with my co-founder, Derica Wilson, for 17 years now, that people of color are disappearing at an alarming rate, and we're not getting the media coverage at all. So my strategy as a media strategist, I guess, is to ensure that our missing are household names too. So looking forward to today's conversation, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Jonathan Franklin.
Hey there, I'm Jonathan Franklin. I am a Washington, D.C. based national correspondent. I have a decade of experience covering national, international, and local news across Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina, and pretty much everything that has happened within the past decade, I have covered it. My specialty when it comes to reporting is more so focusing on missing persons across the spectrum of missing people of color, anything around race, culture, identity, justice, or my specialties and my beats that I tend to focus my reporting on.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jonelle Henry.
Thank you, Ashley, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Janelle Henry, and I'm the inaugural director of the CJC by DC program, which is out of the College of Journalism and Communications at the University of Florida. So basically, I bring students from Florida to DC to experience media and journalism here in the district. But before that time, for 20 years, I was a political journalist at C-SPAN, covering all of the major political and public affairs stories that are happening around the country. So I'm really happy to be here, and I was excited to be part of this task force, and I can't wait to talk about this topic with you all tonight.
Thank you so much. So, Natalie, we're going to start with you, founder of Black and Missing Foundation. What inspired the creation of the media guide? Tell us about that media guide.
Well, what started the task force first is that we know that there's a lack of media coverage when it comes to missing persons of color. And we wanted to bring about change because we know that visibility equals justice, right? We've seen it time and time again, where visibility can help save lives. So I'm a member of WABJ, and I've worked with Jonathan and Janelle and many of the journalists. And I thought it would be, appropriate to have the people that are reporting the news to put together this guide. And I'm sure Jonathan tells a story that just makes me so angry a lot. When he's pushing his news director to tell, the story of a missing person, and they're like, no, and he can tell it better than I can. No, we're not going to tell this story. And he gives it to his colleague that's not of color, and it happens. So what we wanted to do is to ensure that newsrooms across the country have some type of guideline, right, to do away with inherent biases when it comes to coverage of missing people of color. And what we're finding, or what we found, is that many times newsrooms do not have any policies and procedures in place, right? So who's making that decision as to who gets coverage is typically a middle-aged white man that's focused on ratings and sponsorship. And we get that, right? The bills have to be paid. But we also have to understand these are lives, and these are valuable members of our community that we need to focus on. So that, again, is the reason why we created the guide, to do away with these inherent biases that can really affect a case and the outcome.
Jonathan, I want to hear from you. Natalie mentioned that. Tell me about, how do you feel about how we are, or how newsrooms are covering missing persons of color?
Yeah, so I mean, like as Natalie mentioned, as newsrooms are no stranger to, reporting out the missing people cases when it involves missing people. As Natalie mentioned, there was a time where I worked in a local newsroom. I won't say which one because still on my resume. So if you want to do the research, just go on my LinkedIn and figure it out, do the math. But there was a time where we weren't covering missing people of color, particularly missing Black people. I remember distinctly I was in contact with a couple of police departments, and they were feeding me information when it came to missing persons. I said, "Oh, like we need to cover this story," and I pitched the story in the editorial meeting. It got shot down by the managing editor, the news director, executive producer. They're like, "Oh no, this isn't important," and I knew that obviously this is an important case because, as Natalie will mention, time and time again, I've worked with her. Like the first 24 to 48 hours when it comes to missing person case are the most important. So I knew that time was not on our side, but time was ticking and we needed to do the story. And it got denied. And I said, okay, well, let me come up with a strategy. So I gave it to literally my white colleague. I said, hey, girl, like pitch a story. We really need to do it. She said, okay. So she pitched it. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is such a great story. Like, yeah, we would really need to do it. And she literally said, Jonathan pitched the story in a Dayside meeting. Like, why wasn't this greenlit? So it's just the pros and cons in the newsroom, but oftentimes we see it. Like I've been to some good newsrooms, I've been to some bad newsrooms, and both have had the distinct of the common denominator is that we don't give attention, or we don't really do what we need to do when it comes to reporting out missing people of color.
That is interesting. And Jonelle, you have been at C-SPAN for years, but now you're on the campus, right, at the University of Florida. So how can student journalists in chapter in ABJ at campuses apply this guide to their newsroom?
No, I think that's a really important question. And now that I'm working in academia and helping student journalists, get ready for the big newsrooms, for the strategy sessions and the meetings, I think it's really important for us to start early. This is an NABJ webinar, but obviously NABJ is also student chapters that are all over the country that are learning how to get ready for the roles that they're going to serve post-graduation. And so, this is a really important guide, not just for the adults in the room, but the students that are learning and that are going to be the adults in the room and are going to have to make those important decisions about how these stories are covered. These are classes that are being taught currently, how we cover story, how we do it with accuracy and with authority. There are organizations and clubs that students are a part of where you're talking about professional development and you're offering training to become better journalists, better communicators. And so why not take this information and start in the college environment and prepare our student journalists for, the kind of environment that they're going to enter into when they graduate. And so I'm really excited about this work. I'm excited about this guide. I really see that it's going to have a place on college campuses and in classrooms around the country. And that's going to be a great thing because this information is going to be released early on rather than trying to figure it out on the go. Perhaps our students will be able to come into newsrooms with this information in tow and be able to share this with their colleagues and contribute in that way. So I'm excited about the trainings that are going to happen. Natalie, we're gonna lock them in and make sure that our students feel, really empowered to take this information into their future newsrooms.
Yes. Natalie, what are some key do's and don'ts that journalists should keep in mind when reporting about missing persons?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the guide is very practical, right? And can be used by anyone. So the first thing is avoid harmful language. What we are seeing, and it starts with law enforcement, they're classifying our children as a runaway. And if you're classified as a runaway, you are not getting the Amber Alert. You're definitely not getting any media coverage at all. And law enforcement isn't adding resources to this case. 9 out of the 10 children who are reported to us as missing, they're really not running away. So as journalists push back a bit with, law enforcement to really question, did this child run away? And although your news outlet may not want to cover a child that's been classified as a runaway, how can we find ways to bring attention to this missing child or children? Because ultimately, what are they running from and who are they running to? We know that within 24 to 48 hours of them being on the street, they become victims of sex trafficking. And we also ask you to portray the victims with dignity. One of the things that we see all the time is that, you know, reporters will go to a missing person's social page. Well, it's a social page, right? And don't show them in a bad light, partying images or unflattering shots. Just be mindful of the images that you are sharing and look at these individuals as who they are. They're a part of our community and we need to humanize them. And so we need you to really show some empathy, some sympathy, and some respect, quite honest, for their families, because their families are looking at the media that's out there, the social media comments, and it's disheartening to them sometimes. And again, remove the bias. And we all have inherent biases, but let's do our jobs effectively, regardless of their background. And if they had gotten in trouble before, their missing has nothing to do with their prior history. So stop referring back to that. I see it time and time again. So let's, move in a different direction.
Jonathan, I'm going to ask this question to you. Why do you think certain stories, like those involving white women or children, tend to dominate headlines while others rarely make national news?
It's kind of what Natalie had mentioned earlier. It's like a lot of missing people of color are classified as runaways, or they're boxed in this category of, they're doing bad things. They've had a criminal past. They're sex workers. So we're already labeled as other when it comes to this category, and when it comes to missing white women, and we coined the term missing white women syndrome. A lot of the attractive younger white women would get the media's attention. They would kind of turn their heads and be like, oh wow, like, this is on television. We must do something. This must be really important. But there were 5 other people around the same age or that fit that same category, but they're Black, don't oftentimes get the same media attention. And I think also it also appeals, or it comes to the top up, like leadership decisions. There are not a lot of us, and when I mean us, not a lot of Black people that are in the leadership positions, like as news directors, assistant news directors, executive producers, even producers that can have the keys to the car, that drive the car, that make the shots in those editorial decisions. There are not a lot of us in those positions that will make the calls to say, like, you know what, this is a story, or you know what, we need to tweak the language of this. And so we oftentimes are faced with doing it on social media, like posting missing person flyers across social media instead of it being the lead story on 6 o'clock or dominating the top of the website. So we're not really seeing a lot of that. And I think that goes hand in hand with leadership. And also there's not a lot of people that look like us that are making new leadership positions, or even that are telling these stories. I remember distinctly working, again, another newsroom. You can do the math. I'm not going to name it. I pitched a story of missing a young, she was like a teenage, she was like 17, 18 years old. We kept getting the flyer that she was missing. I said, okay, this is a story. She is continuously missing or running away or missing. We need to do a story. It got shot down. I said, okay, I did the legwork, did it on my own. And flash forward to 2 weeks when I pitched the story last. Unfortunately, the girl was found dead. So it's sort of like, well, now this transition from being a missing person story to now a homicide. So if we were to have the legwork of, okay, we talked to the family, we did the investigation, we talked to the PIO, we talked to the police department investigators, we would have already had that in the bag. But now it's sort of, okay, we're playing catch up and doing the legwork because now it's a homicide. So how we think about the editorial process really goes hand in hand with how we are presenting the stories and how we're making the decisions for it to go on air, for it to go online.
And that brings me to social
Ashley, can
media.
I add something
You
that Jonathan said? There's no such thing as a perfect person. We're not perfect. And I think that's what journalists are looking for. If you think about Dakara, who went missing from, the DMV area, the comments were terrible. And the insinuations really impacted, some of the media coverage that she received and in social media comments. So we do have to do away again with those stereotypes that no one is perfect, and we need to get beyond that to figure out what happened to them and ultimately bring them home safely, or at least to have answers for their families, and stop going back to their past, right? And look at what happened now.
Can I also add to that too that um, just a point about the sensitivity that's required in covering these cases, and how, as journalists, we're not only journalists, right? We're also neighbors. We're in organizations. At the time of Relisha Rudd's disappearance here in the DC area, I was a Girl Scout troop leader and a journalist, right? And so I was talking about this case with my Girl Scouts. They were scared. They didn't want to sell cookies, and so it really helps you frame how much the community is involved in, kind of understanding these cases, and how I, as a journalist, even in that moment, was able to share clarity and talk about the case in a different way and be able to break it down to our community. That's also our resources. Those are our sources. What's being said on the ground? How are they responding to the coverage that is either happening or not happening? And I think there can be some sensitivity and some compassion that we can take on as professionals and bring that in the newsroom, especially when covering cases like this, where sensitivity and compassion is really important. And sometimes in the newsroom, things can be very sterile, very clinical, very cut and dry, very black and white. And that kind of precision is necessary for a good news story, but how you interact with the community that is desperate, that is distraught, that is, brokenhearted in many ways, how do you balance that out? So I didn't mean to throw this off into another conversation, but that was something that I thought about as a working professional. We're also humans, neighbors. These are happening in our neighborhoods as well. And when it's up close and personal and it's happening in your neighborhood, it's a different kind of advocacy, a different kind of fight that you're bringing to the newsroom. So I just wanted to empower us to remind us that we have that authority and we have that power. And sometimes when we're the only one in the newsroom or in the room, period, that we can bring those stories to really give some context and to humanize what's happening on the ground.
How can newsrooms, and anybody can answer this one, we all are in newsrooms or have been, how can newsrooms and journalists begin to implement from the recommendations from the guide in their daily reporting practices? Jonathan, I'll
That's a
start with
good
you.
one.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I was gonna say that's a good one. I guess two things. So when doing or getting the green light to tell these stories, the two things that I always do and make sure that when I'm talking to families and writing the script, I always ask for updated pictures or pictures. I'm like, okay, what picture would you like for me to go on air or post online? Because the pictures we get from police departments, they're not the best, or sometimes they're mugshots, or sometimes they're pictures from, them doing the peace sign or in the club or, whatever activity they were doing. But I always ask the family, okay, can you provide me some photos that you would, like for me to go on air with and post? Because I'm telling a story. I'm essentially like what Janelle was saying, like you're painting a picture, you're telling the story, you need to move with empathy. That's one of the main things I do as a reporter is always try to be a person first and insert myself, because what if this was me, or what if this was one of my family members? So sort of how would I navigate that? So I always try to set the stage of saying, okay, what pictures could you provide for me that I can use for my reporting? And also when writing the script, always try to write it in present tense, like the person is still alive. You don't want to write it in past tense and kill them off. Is sort of like the thing we say when you're writing court stories. You always have to put allegedly to kind of not get sued. So always write in present tense or as they're still alive, because again, you don't want to date the story, or you don't want to you know wish bad things on them. So I always try to write the story in present tense as if they're still alive. And also when talking to families, move with empathy and ask questions that, would sort of paint the picture that they wanted to. So it's like, okay, well, describe, and I'm going to use Natalie as an example, describe Natalie as a person. Like, what were her hobbies? What does she like to do? What is, some of the things that you would describe her as? Or what were her friends describe her as? So sort of, like I said, moving with empathy, because that will make your job easier as a reporter to tell the story and not just doing a sort of the reporting, but more of a storytelling.
Absolutely. Natalie, you want to take that?
Yeah, and I echo everything that Jonathan just said, and I think it's so important to move and see these stories with empathy, see yourself in it, see your loved one, your child. I mean, look, Janelle mentioned Relisha Rudd. I think that's DC's baby, right? If you have children or grandchildren, you look in her eyes and you can see yourself, in there. And I know as journalists, you're not supposed to personalize it, but these are our people being affected, and the community or the very institutions that are there to highlight or bring visibility to their disappearance, they're turning a blind eye to them. And if you have a platform, again, you may not be able to, show a case on air, but you also have a huge following on social media, right? You also have a huge network of family and friends and professionals. So share that missing persons flyer, because again, it takes one person to come forward. And visibility is key. I rely on WABJ reporters and producers all the time. When I can't get any coverage at all, I can pick up a phone and call someone, and they show these cases. And guess what? We have success. The community is aware that the person is missing, and many times we receive tips that lead us directly to that missing individual. So we all can play a role. We cannot say, oh, you know what, my editor or assignment, editor don't want to tell the story. Find a way to do it. Of course, keep your job. We all need to be paid and all of that, but find a way to get it done, because no one is advocating for these missing young women and men. They're seeing, I mean, even the administration said our boys are thugs and criminals. No, they're not. So let's do a better job in protecting those that are most vulnerable. And again, visibility leads to justice and answers.
I love that. Um, I definitely want to think about, before we go into the newsroom. And obviously, I mentioned earlier being in academia, I'm so passionate about making sure that our students are prepared for the newsrooms. And so I really think back to one of the things that we can do with this media guide is to host training sessions. I mean, NABJ does a great job of hosting sessions, professional development sessions, training sessions, so that we can really perfect our craft and we can really understand what needs to be done. And so I think that's one of the, I don't know if it's preventative is the right word, but that's one of the proactive measures that we can take to prepare ourselves for this work because it's inevitably going to happen. Someone's going to be missing in your community that you're in right now. Someone probably is, according to the numbers. And more than likely, many of them look like us. And so, you can start from there. Is there enough coverage around the stories that you're hearing? And if not, then should we take a half day and people sign up and get some training about how we can cover this with authority and sensitivity and compassion? So we can do that on college campuses. We can certainly do that in our newsrooms because I remember taking training sessions so that I can better my craft, and they were during office hours, So I think there are things that we can do if you're strategic, and if this is not a need that's being met in your departments, in your newsroom, then this is a really easy way to get some information. Secondly, everyone just needs to have a copy. So if you're a newsroom, download this copy, print it out, whatever you need to do, make sure everyone has it the same way that I had, I'm dating myself here. There you go, Natalie. I'm dating myself here, but where we had like the reporter's notebook, right? And we had all the contacts in the Rolodex, and things like that. We always had that information with us when we were going out to cover stories. We always had everyone's name, number, all the contacts. We still can have that, and this can be part of that toolkit that we have on hand. And I mean, I am biased, and that's a word that we don't like to use in this industry, right? But I am biased because I was on this task force, and I know the work that went into putting this together. It was for us, by us, right? And so I really want everyone to take the time to read it like it's a book, like it's a story, because it is a story. It's about telling the story of someone that's lost and helping or that's someone that could have been kidnapped or a crime could have been done, and really helping that family, get to the bottom of why their loved one is missing at this time. So definitely that training component, that's part of the things that you can do tonight as soon as you get off this call. And I just really encourage everyone to take advantage of that opportunity. Natalie is ready to do it. So I think that's a great way to really equip ourselves and get ready.
Thank you so much. And if you're just joining us, I want to circle the conversation. We're talking about fair coverage now, reshaping how we report on missing persons, presented by NABJ. I know I mentioned earlier to put your questions in the chat box. Please put your questions in the Q&A box so our panelists can go ahead and answer them. Again, please use the Q&A box to post your questions for our esteemed panelists. Now, earlier, Natalie, you mentioned the partnership with WABJ. How can we learn from like a good strategic partnership with WABJ and the Black and Missing Foundation?
I'm sorry, can you clarify that?
Earlier, we talked about you were grateful that you collaborated with WABJ. What else can we learn from strategic partnerships like WABJ and Black and Missing Foundation, Inc.?
Well, what we can learn is that we can't do this work alone. It takes all of us, right? It takes the media. I mean, again, visibility is key in bringing awareness to our missing. And that's one of the reasons why we started the organization. There was a young lady by the name of Tamika Houston who went missing. And her aunt, who's in media relations, she really struggled to get national media coverage. Natalie Holloway disappeared. I'm sure when I said her name, you all know her face, you know her story. And Tamika's aunt Rebecca reached out to those same reporters, same networks, same programs, and guess what? She was met with silence. No one cared. But what I'm realizing with WABJ, the reporters, they really care. The producers really care. Phil cares. And let me tell you, I call and text Phil all the time, very early in the morning, well, not too late at night, and he responds to me. There's Melinda that I reach out to, Jonathan, Janelle, everyone is willing to jump in and help. So I think the takeaway is, we need to work arm in arm together to get this done. And the work that we do really puts pressure on law enforcement to add resources to the case. This is something that Jonathan did all the time. He's like, I'm calling law enforcement, I'm calling the detective. And immediately we're seeing traction on the case. Immediately the family's calling and saying, you know what, the detective gave me an update. So again, it's a partnership to get this work done.
And can I just add, this was such a dope partnership. It was so strategic and so like it was just perfect. We're all in different organizations and we work with different partners and everything. But when this partnership was formed and the task force was formed, it was so smart to me. To get a room full of journalists that are committed to fair and accurate reporting, right? That is what we do, and to partner with an advocacy organization that saw, a discrepancy, that saw, a missing piece in the coverage of missing people of color in particular. And it's just like the two missions of the two organizations. I mean, you could read it on both websites, but it just gelled really well together. And it made even working on this task force so purpose driven, so mission focused, because we were working towards the same goal. And I just thought it was really smart. And I thought it was a great way for both organizations to kind of lockstep, be doing something that's meaningful for not just, for journalists, but also for the community. I've been talking to people about this media guide, just everyday people in the community, because I want them to feel empowered that there is a way that this should be covered with accuracy and with compassion. And you should know about that so that if you don't see that, you too can call your news station or call, the police station and say, hey, why isn't there coverage about this? I saw coverage about this person. Why, and so there's just so much that can come from this partnership. And I'm just so proud to serve on the task force. I know, Jonathan, you are. We had a really good time putting together this media guide. It was a tough topic, but we had such a great time and just such a great team dedicated to making sure that coverage is fair and that everyone gets the same level of dignity and coverage in this. So I just really wanted to put that out there because all partnerships are not the same and sometimes they don't work, but this worked beautifully and it was such a smart move.
I'm also going to give Natalie her flowers. I mean, the partnerships with TV. I remember seeing movies on Lifetime, stuff, content on Dateline. So I'm happy she got together with our journalists here in DC to do this. We have other things that we're planning just to get the messaging and get the word out there. So I also want to give you your flowers, Natalie. Thank you. Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on that question. Now, how can collaboration such as this between journalists and organizations like Black and Missing Foundation help bridge coverage gaps?
Yeah, I mean, the Black and Missing Foundation, like especially as a reporter, that's essentially a source. Like you're building sources as journalists, you have to continuously build sources, whether that's in the community. Especially, I know, like for our the national reporters, it's kind of harder for us to build sources because we're spread across the United States. But if you're a local reporter, call upon like the Black and Missing Foundation because that is essentially a source. Natalie and Erica have tons and tons of cases that they continuously track and feed. And they're always asking me, oh, do you know a person in Jacksonville? Do you know a person in Memphis? Do you know a person in Philadelphia? And nine times out of 10, I probably do because, again, NABJ is very big. And I just know a lot of people. Natalie always jokes around and says I'm very extroverted, which is true. But I know people in different places. But build and use your sources and use the Black and Missing Foundation as a source to elevate your storytelling. I remember distinctly, Natalie called me, I think it was 2023, around 2023, and you said, hey, I have a case for you. It's the 25th anniversary, and I was okay, like feeding me more details. Like our relationship is very funny because I call her my fairy godmother, but she does like to be called a fairy godmother. But she always jokes around and says, okay, I got a story for you.
Auntie.
Well, yes, and you joke around, you say, "Oh, I got a story for you." I'm like, "Why are you giving me more work?" But again, like as a source reporter relationship, we have to continuously build that relationship. And so she pitched me this story that I ended up doing the story. It was in Unadilla, Georgia, was
Mm-hmm.
Shikimia Pate. and went down to Unadilla, Georgia, which I've never heard of. I know Macon, Georgia, which is right outside of Macon. So I went down there, did the story, reported it, and I get a call from Shaikemia's mother that said, based off of our reporting that we did on the story, it shifted from a cold case to it reopened and it got more leads. So you never know what the power of storytelling that you can do, even though it was a decades long case that it was showed, it was a cold case based off our reporting. Again, a story that Natalie's like, I think you should really do this. And I said, okay. So pitched the story and it got national attention. Because of that national attention, it shifted from a cold case to reopen and it got new leads. So it's just you never know. You always have to sort of twist and turn and sort of, okay, how is this going to turn out? How is you never know? It's sort of like throwing stuff at the wall and see if it sticks. And at that point, it did stick, but 9 times out of 10, it's just you have to just play roulette and figure it out. So I would say, just trust your instinct, but also have that reporter source relationship because it will eventually pay off, not just for yourself as a reporter, but also you're doing this work for the community.
Janelle, did you want to add to that?
I think I pretty much said, everything I said before about how this partnership is so beyond even the newsroom. It's for the community. It's for anyone in advocacy. It's to understand how you can partner with media professionals, how you can partner with, the police department. So, the guide really gets through all of that, and it just really helps you to just kind of frame what covering the story, what all it entails, and just kind of empowering the community in that way. So I definitely think it is what is needed to kind of highlight some of these gaps. It's a solution media guide, right? It's solution oriented. It's not talking about what you didn't do. It's not talking about what you should do, it's talking about here is a guide. You can literally page to page just follow it along and you will be able to cover stories, the way that it should be covered. So I think, we're very intentional about how we design that. We know that the gaps exist. We know that it's difficult to pitch these stories. And so if we can give some guidance on how to frame it and what to do when you actually have that story in your hand, then, I think we've done our work here. So we're excited to see where it goes. And we definitely want to hear about the newsrooms that are implementing this into how they tell their stories.
Let's go back to social media. What role does social media and digital platforms play in amplifying stories of missing persons of color? And how should traditional media respond?
Well, I mean, on the social media, just as, someone that's observing, everything that's happening on social media, social media can be a love-hate relationship for journalists many times. But, I first learned about missing people through Black and Missing and their social media posts and, encouraging us to reshare it and to really amplify it in our communities. And without fail, every time you share a post, Natalie, every time Derica shares a post, I just see it through like my whole news timeline. Everyone's resharing it, and so someone in this, especially if it's in your area, has seen that person and can when you share it, it really amplifies that. So I think it's critical. It's a very easy way. It's multi-generational, right? Because it's not, we often talk about social media in the context of young people or Gen Z, but everyone who has a social media account can participate in amplifying the story, no matter the platform, right? So Facebook for the older generation, as my students sometimes like to say, or, Instagram or any of those other entities. So I think that's really where it can thrive. In addition, encouraging your local news stations to be able to share those stories on their platforms or tell them that they need to cover it so that you can share it. And so, I've also done that personally, sharing those stories. And so sharing the stories of my fellow journalists when they post it, sharing it from their account. So just blasting it out in that way, that's definitely one way that it could be done. I think the area that we are always talking about, and Natalie, you mentioned this earlier, is the comments around it, right? The comment section is open and everyone's framing their opinion, oftentimes based on a picture of who they think that person is. And so, we talked a lot on the task force about how we have those conversations and how we make sure that those pictures accurately reflect the person that is missing and not our assumption. So, I think it definitely has a role to play. And if used responsibly, it can literally save lives and bring someone home.
Natalie, I'm going to hear
And
from you, and then we'll take the questions from the Q&A box.
okay, and I agree with Janelle. Social media is critical, and we call it our digital milk carton. I know you all are very young, but when I was growing up, missing people were on the milk carton, right? So now we don't do that anymore. And we can't wait for any news cycle. We can't wait for the 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock news. We have to get this information out to the masses instantaneously. I know Derica and I, we travel from DC to New York quite a bit. And when you're on the train, no one is checking your ID. And in 2.5 hours, we're in New York. So think about it. If you're missing from DC, you could be anywhere. And, there was a young child, it was a parental abduction from this area and ended up in New York. And someone on the subway saw this child's missing persons flyer on our social media platform, called us, and we were able to call law enforcement and, get that child home to the custodial parent. So social media is vital. As Janelle said, it's a blessing and a curse. The comments are ridiculous. And we, advise families don't read them, and just we need tips. That's why we also utilize social media, but we need it, and we cannot wait on the traditional news cycle to get this information out to the masses.
Thank you. There's a question in the chats from Alexis Wainwright, and she's from WUSA 9. She says, is there any advice to journalists when it comes to pitching missing person cases? I know sometimes these story pitches fall on deaf ears in the newsroom, or management will pick up and choose which ones to cover. And oftentimes they aren't cases of people of color until it picks up more, maybe more online or streaming. So again, she says, is there any advice to journalists when it comes to pitching missing person cases?
Hand them this book, Alexis. And I will say Alexis is very good in covering these stories. She calls me all the time. What case do you have? Or if there's a case, what information do you have? So, we just have to keep pounding the pavement and, staying in front of your bosses with these cases, and they deserve coverage. And I do think that you do an extremely good job in getting us coverage for local cases. So wanted to thank you for that.
Jonathan, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of editors and producers will oftentimes try to throw it back at you saying, "Oh, it's not trending, like we shouldn't cover it." But how would it be trending if somebody doesn't post it or somebody doesn't cover it? So in order for things to trend, I feel like people kind of lose the formula in terms of how things get, how we cover things is like it starts from something that's trending on social media or something that like we do as journalists to do our job and report it, and all of a sudden it blasts and it's now trending. So I think people are losing the plot when it comes to that. So just what we reiterated before, if it's falling on deaf ears, use your platform as a journalist, put it on Instagram, put it on TikTok, put it on Threads, put it on, I don't know if people still use Twitter or X, just blast it across social media, and people will start to reshare it and share it and share it. And eventually it will trend, and eventually managers will spend a block saying, "Oh, you know what? That was a good story. Good pitch you had, Alexis. Like we should think about doing it." But in order for us to do it, we have to sort of, unfortunately, take it in our own hands and put it across social media and sort of do the legwork ourselves. Like, there's been times where Natalie's pitched me stories and I would pitch it to, newsrooms, and they would say, "Okay, no," but I would go and do the work myself and put it across social media. And all of a sudden, people are like, "You know what? Like, we should think about doing it." Granted, a competitor has probably already have done it, but again, I've already done the legwork to get the story off the ground and running across social media. So again, if it's something that managers are sort of like, "Okay, no, we'll pass," they still deserve justice and still deserve that fair coverage. We just have to take it upon ourselves to do the legwork, do it on social media, sort of, if you have a Substack, put it on Substack. So sort of do the work ourselves, and eventually it will get the legwork, it'll get the traction, but sort of using our other platforms and being creative to still tell those stories.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too. If you have other platforms, because you are a platform, the local community probably knows who you are. And so if you have another platform where you can talk about this story, obviously without getting fired, but if you can, tell the truth in different ways, tell the truth on another platform, then, I would definitely use that to your advantage. I would also, I'm sure in many newsrooms, it's just kind of like, define trending. What does trending mean? Another day, you know, where every minute counts. What's trending? An interview with the family, like what do you need for this story to get on the air? Now, don't say it with the energy that I just presented it, because that might ruffle some feathers. And we know the game that we have to play sometimes in these newsroom conversations. But what do you need for this story to make it on the air? And how much time are we going to take to do that? In the media guide, we also outline, facts around missing people of color. And if you can localize it and if you can talk about it in a way that makes it feel like, okay, well, if we're a local news entity and we care about local news and what's happening locally, then here are the local numbers, and so, meeting facts with facts and kind of being, I don't want to say annoying, but being that person that's just like, you know what I think we should pitch? The same thing I said yesterday. And here's why. Today, in this story, so you're following this story even if your organization is not following it, right? You're staying on top of it, even though your organization may not at this time stay on top of it. So that hopefully when you are able to cover it in a way, you're ready to go. You've had all this information, you've been talking to people, you've been building your sources, you've been doing all of the things that we're taught to do as journalists so that you're ready day one when this happens. And so I think that's one way that we can do it. And it can hopefully show that you're committed to covering this story because you've, talked to your sources and you've gathered all the information and the facts and you're ready to go.
And also, if it's like a larger issue that's at hand, or if it's like a group of girls that have all gone missing in this one particular neighborhood, or for instance, if it's you get a pitch from, police departments or, Natalie and saying, hey, like this is also the same neighborhood that Felicia Rudd went missing. So I think we should probably do the story. So kind of finding different angles to figure out how to advance the story coverage, or sort of like what Janelle was saying, sort of doing that, like finding the day twos on day one to advance your story coverage, so you're not having to pull things out of the air or playing catch up, but it's sort of doing the legwork, but also finding different ways to find the coverage or find a different angle. So that way, if people don't really understand the story that you're trying to pitch, saying, okay, well, also, 5 years ago we covered this story, and people, they love to, do continuing coverage, or saying, oh, and pulling archival footage. So being able to find different angles or different ways that we've already done this story, but using previous archival footage or archival notes or other things to sort of get people to understand why this is important, but also getting management to greenlight the story and why we should cover it.
And can I also add, in the guide, it also lists the various public alert or communication systems. So for instance, there's the Ebony Alert, and this is for California only, right? There's the Ashanti Billy Alert, and that's for Virginia. It's supposed to be nationwide, but it's really not happening yet. The Cody Alert, that's for Virginia only. So look at the guide and see what alerts are applicable to your viewing audience or your readers. And then, this will give you an opportunity to find a way to get some of these stories out there. There's the Suzanne Law. It's a federal law and it's applicable or similar to the Amber Alert, but there's so many alerts out there. I think we have about 12 pages of alerts, and we all need to be mindful of them and know at least the ones that are applicable to your area, your covering area.
One last quick thing, just about, again, going back to students. I mean, this is a great opportunity, especially if the person is missing is a student. This is a great opportunity to, work with your student NABJ chapters, for example, or any student journalist that really has that investigative spirit that really wants to dig into this. This could be a great front page story for their campus newspaper. That's still news. That still has an audience that's really, interested in what's happening in their community. So, if there are creative ways that we can, pitch this story to them, or, this could really kind of catapult their career in such an amazing way, and they can be part of the process too. So I know it's a little bit, unorthodox, but I think we really need to lean into those opportunities as well as we're, again, building our student journalists and preparing them for the newsroom. I'm always going to have that angle because that's the space that I'm in right now, and that's what I'm really, passionate about. So, if you have any access to students, if you're adjunct, if you are, if you lead any of the NABJ student chapters, this is a great opportunity, a great project that could really save lives if done, done well. So I think that's another opportunity for us to pitch the story around and get other journalists to be part of it.
Melody in the chat says it's not a question, but there's a missing woman in Philadelphia and she's monitoring that coverage. Melanie, if you could drop her name in the chat so I can make sure to announce that so we can do our part in helping with finding this missing person. There's another question in the chat, and this is Natalie, will the Black and Missing Foundation continue their partnership with On Patrol Live?
We hope so. It has been a great partnership and resulted in us being able to bring, some missing children home and some adults as well. So we hope so. They have a great team, but most importantly, it brings visibility to cases. I believe that they have viewership of at least 10 million. So can you imagine? I mean, these cases are being seen all across the country and the world, and they've been very, very effective. So I hope so that the partnership continues. And we'll be on this weekend. So if you look at OP Live, I'll be the guest to talk about a case on Saturday.
Yes. Any final words as we prepare to wrap? Jonelle, let's start with you. What can we do?
Looked at the time. I was like, oh, wow, it's already at the end of the hour. This went by so fast. One, I'm just really proud of the work that we've been able to accomplish, both WABJ, which I'm a member of, and Black and Missing Foundation, which I've worked with in my personal capacity, and see the amazing work that they've done. So really just proud of what we've been able to push out. This guide is helpful. This guide can be your Bible in the newsroom if you choose to. And so really take advantage of the resources that are available. Educate yourself. We know that everyone has beats, but this is great information for you to just know, both as an advocate in the newsroom and in your community. So I definitely encourage everyone to download the media guide, wear it close to your heart, understand it, understand what you need to do. And definitely for all the educators in the room, all the adjuncts in the room, know that this is something that can be very useful and a great training ground for our student journalists, making sure that they understand what it means to be a compassionate journalist, a journalist that advocates for stories to be covered accurately and with compassion in their community. This is one of many, but this is a great opportunity to help them see what they can do with the kind of stories that they tell in the future. So I'm certainly excited about that work, and I'm excited about talking about this media guide. Whatever you need me to do, Natalie, Phil, I'm here to really push this out and make sure that everyone understand that there is a solution out there to really address the gaps that we're seeing in the newsroom as it pertains to the coverage of missing people of color.
Natalie, share some takeaways for us, please.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we again need to recognize that every person that's missing need to be found, or at least have that chance to be found. And the only way to do that is through the media and visibility. And I'm hoping that this guide will be a tool to help newsrooms and journalists really show compassion, right? And empathy, because visibility saves lives. So, and we all can work together. Again, this is the media, law enforcement, and the community to make sure that no one is overlooked. Because too many of our missing are being overlooked, and we can no longer turn a blind eye to this issue.
Melanie dropped the name in the chat. Her name is Kata Scott, and she's 23 years old. Thank you. We'll do our parts to try to help get this person found. Thank you.
Well,
Melanie.
there's been some development on that case. Someone was arrested today in possibly her murder. So we've been monitoring Kata's case. So thank you for that. And her aunt and her dad did reach out to us for assistance. So thank you, Melanie.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Jonathan, any last takeaways?
Yeah, for my fellow reporters and producers out there, keep fighting the fight. I know it's hard. We we need to get paid, but I know it's hard. Times are hard, so we still need to do our part to get the stories on air, online, in print, on TV, radio, whatever that may be. Advocate for the media guide to be implemented in your newsroom. If you have any questions, you can ask one of us on the task force committee, or you can, tap me. You find my socials. I'm pretty much everywhere. Just type in Jonathan Franklin, I pop up. Happy to provide any assistance. One thing, and this always sticks out to me. A mentor said this to me years ago when I first started out in the business, and I was like, "Oh, what? Like, what does this mean?" And then once I got in my first newsroom, I was like, "Okay, this makes sense." If your newsroom is not reflective of the communities that you're trying to serve, you're doing more of a disservice and not a service to that community. So what I mean by that is if you are in a place that's very diverse, like a Miami or Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Jacksonville, any other place that's very diverse, and your newsroom isn't reflective of the communities that you're trying to serve, you're already doing a disservice to that community. So we need to do our part with really as journalists to advocate for more diversity in the newsroom. I know we're in trying times and things are in transitional state, and that might not be top of the priority, but we have to really be mindful of having the more diversity or more having the newsroom reflective of the communities that we're trying to serve. So just keep that in mind when trying to, we're advocating for these stories, and look around where, we might be the only one, or we might be the only one, two, or three, but doing our part to make sure that our stories get told, and we're doing our part as journalists to move with empathy, but also doing our part to get the stories and the coverage that we deserve.
If we want to
Let me
connect,
add one more thing that Jonathan said. We're hearing that a lot too, Jonathan. This is not a DEI issue. This is a human rights issue. And that's what we need to be mindful of as we're in the newsrooms. I know what the administration is pushing, but there are too many people of color that are disappearing. And you're right, there needs to be more visibility. So they can say all of this BS about DEI. It's not. This is a human rights. This is a pandemic that is happening in our community. And many times, as you all know, 40% of all persons reported missing are of color. We know the numbers are higher, right? Hispanics are categorized as whites. They're not white. Many times, they see themselves as Afro-Latina. And in this environment, how many more people are missing and no one is reporting them? So that maybe that's a story that someone needs to do. See what the true numbers are. You're on mute, Ashley.
thank you. And Dr. Tanya Stafford said we make up 13% of the population. That is so true. Before we wrap, I want to make sure that we can connect with you all offline. Janelle, please tell us how we can connect with you offline, via social or via email or phone.
Yes, Janelle Henry. I'm on LinkedIn all day long, so you can catch me on LinkedIn for sure. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, at Janelle the Passionista, so you can reach me there as well too. And I'd love to connect.
Natalie.
I am also on LinkedIn, Natalie Wilson. I do not have any personal social media, but there's the Black and Missing Foundation. So if you go to our website at bamfi.org, all of our social media information is there, and also at NWR Comms Group on Instagram.
Jonathan.
Also on LinkedIn, Jonathan Franklin. It's spelled how it is down in the panelists or the chat. I've also dropped in the chat my social media handles on Instagram, TikTok. I'm all the same at That's Johnny Frank. So I'm pretty much finding verifiable, all that. So yeah, I'm pretty much I've responded to DMs, story pitches. If you need consulting about how to get this off the ground, also happy to help as well. But yeah, very easy to find. So hit me up.
I want to give a big thank you to WABJ's president, Phil Lewis. He put this together. We are here on this national platform presented by NABJ because of him. Thank you. I am Ashley Demie, tonight's moderator. I can be found at I am Ashley Demie on all social media platforms. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending.